Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another week live with Caeli. Calling all real estate investors. We're actually going to get music, I think, is what we're going to do. We're going to do some professional introductions here, but here we are again. Every Tuesday we meet, or at least we try to meet every Tuesday, starting at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Pacific. And hopefully as the universe aligns, we always get to meet with Caeli Ridge and share information. And today, Caeli, you are going to be discussing how to get ready for your next long-term rental. You said you're going to review important checklist items like neighborhood, property class, tenant pool, industry, schools, age of the property, presumably many, many more things. So welcome, everyone. And Caeli, take it away.
Thank you so much, Larry. Hey, guys. Happy Tuesday. Good to be with you today. We're going to keep this as kind of an open forum, lots of Q&A. If you guys have anything, as always, please stick it in the chat. This is going to be kind of a part one. The next, we're going to do a deeper dive into calculations of rate of return and cash on cash and what are the differences and all of that stuff. So our next live event, you can plan on that. But for today, we're just going to kind of go through some basics on some of the more common things that you really want to be asking yourself and looking into and doing your own due diligence for the long-term rental property or rental income. Short-term would be different, obviously. So today we're just going to talk about a few bullet points. And like I said, keep an open dialogue here. So we'll just have some back and forth, I hope. One of the first, I'm just going to dive right into this. So one of the first things that we really want to identify when we're talking about our long-term rental strategy is, are we focusing on primarily cash flow, or are we focusing on primarily appreciation? Keeping in mind that the general rule of thumb, and there are always exceptions to these rules, is that the higher the appreciation the market has, the lower the cash flow, and vice versa. Not always the case, but generally. Appreciation markets are going to be in those Sunbelt states, and the cash flow markets generally are going to be in the landlocked states. So determining what that looks like for you, I think a nice balance of both. And if you can find a market where you can get a little bit of each, especially if you're going to kind of diversify and incorporate the shorter term rental or maybe a 2 to 4 unit, that might be something to consider as well. So that first thing you really want to do is you really want to identify your market. Where do you want to be and why? Why are you there? We're probably, for this set of conversation, we're probably not going to get too much into the tax benefit of long-term rentals. Well, if we have time, maybe I should just add that to my notes. If we have time, maybe we can, but I doubt that we will. So market is the first place that I'm going to tell you guys to start. The next thing, and I think that this is a little bit lost in translation, and that a lot of investors just assume that, you know, the property management is going to be in charge of all of the, who is your tenant? Who do you want your tenant to be? This may be an important question for you to be asking yourselves. What does that look like for you? Do you want your tenant to be students? Do you want to be in a college town? And if you do, why? And have you thought about the risks versus the rewards? I have some clients that have been very successful in buying homes in college towns that have, you know, 5-bedroom Victorian style homes, and maybe they've outfitted it with 2 separate kitchens or whatever it may be, and they're gaining $1,000 per room, right, on a single family residence there. Maybe that's your model, keeping in mind the wear and tear. You're going to have to assume that the wear and tear on that property, if that's your model, is going to be I would say on the high end of what those costs, those maintenance and repair costs would be. What if you really want to focus on a model of tenant that is a working class individual? What if it is you know, families, small families, low income, professionals? So I want to kind of touch on each one of those just to kind of give you an outline or overview of what you really want to be focused on, or maybe talking to your property management about. You should be doing your Google searches, and you should be doing this research for yourselves as well, I would say, in addition to anything else you can gather from your property management, from your turnkey, from your real estate agents. So let's talk about Obviously, if you're going to go for the students, is there an area or are there colleges around there? What is the population of said college? Is it a junior college? Is it a university? Those types of things. And what about if it's for a family? You want to work on just focusing on families as who you want your tenant profile to be. What are the schools, the grade schools in and around that area like? Are you going to attract the right tenants for that type of model? What about you want to look at maybe your philosophy is Section 8, right? You want to look at low income. As you know, well, if you don't know, Section 8 is going to be about the amount of income that an individual or individuals make, and that's how they're going to determine if the individual qualifies for Section 8 housing. All of that stuff is public record. You can find out per zip code the average annual income, right? So those are some of the things that you want to start looking at.
Caeli, for those that are just joining, because we had a bunch of people just join, what we're going over right now is how to prepare for your next long-term rental. And I think you're going in through your tenant pool, things that you want to think about that you're focusing in for your property. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And I'll repeat, a lot of times investors don't really think too much about who they want their tenant to be, and they just rely on their property manager to fill the void. And that's fine. That's perfectly fine. If you really want to be hands-off and you know you've got a property manager that you can trust and that they're going to get the tenant in there, and that the property manager's track record is solid, and their vacancy for all the properties that they manage is very, very low, and their average lease is 2 years, 18 months, whatever it is, then by all means, right? If you don't want to deal with that, that's fine. But sometimes it even if for nothing else, your own edification, maybe it makes sense to zero in on the type of tenant you want living in your investment property, right? This is a big purchase, and it's meant to create big returns for you in the long term. So I think that to have a little bit of a say in who you want in there, and if you do have a particular model that you strictly want to stick by, you can give that to your property manager. Now, you may limit yourself to how quickly it gets rented or the turnover, depending on what the model is or the profile of the tenant is and the area in which the property is located, for the reasons that I've described. I won't go back through all of that, but kind of going forward, a few other tenant profiles that I haven't mentioned yet. What about tech execs? So I used to actually, this is back maybe 150 years ago, I used to actually go to, for the financing end of all of this, I would go to the relocation departments of Nike or FedEx or whatever for their execs, right? Where I would get in touch, I would figure out who those people or who that person was, and I would cold call and say, hey, we do financing, I'm licensed all over, you are relocating your executive team from Texas to Washington, we're going to do those loans. You can make those phone calls, you can get that information. And if you know you want your tenant to be those families, and maybe you know that they're only going to be needing the investment as a rental for 6 months, right? But you can usually charge a higher price point. That's probably going to mean that you're looking at properties that are A-class in nicer neighborhoods in, depending on the area, $250,000 to $750,000. So that would be another profile of a tenant if you wanted to diversify in that way too. Let's see, what else do we have here? So keep in mind, who do you want your tenant to be? And once you've identified who you think that person is, you can market directly to that, or you can give your property management the direction or the feedback of what you want that to be. Property class, A, B, and C, right? Classes A, B, and C. I haven't ever gotten into D property class, and for those that don't necessarily know what I'm talking about, it's really the age of the property and the condition of the property. New construction, no rehab necessary, higher end, that's going to be A property types. B, C, I mean, you guys can get the picture what that is. As it relates to your tenant profile, clearly you're going to connect those dots. If you know you want to be in a lower income, and those are the tenants that you want to attract, and you know you want to be working with Section 8, that's guaranteed rent, right? That's what Section 8 is. Then you're probably going to be in the B, C, maybe D. Again, D has not been something that I ever really got into. I always felt a little bit squirrely about that. I remember early on in my career, and a lot of people have done very, very well in those D property types. I thought that for me, because I had a full-time job, I didn't have the acumen to make sure that I could keep up with the maintenance and repair and stuff. Anyway, so that's something else to consider. What is your property class? What does that look like for you? And does it fit in line with the tenant profile for that particular purchase? And this is going to change. It should change on a per property or per acquisition basis, right? Unless you know that you have one model and you just stick to that and you want to stay the same. That goes outside the diversification feedback that I generally give. I think that a nice balanced portfolio of a combination of all the things that we're talking about is usually the right recipe. Happy to listen to somebody else's experiences and what they think there. Okay, so let's move on. The other thing that I used to look at very closely when I was determining for my long-term rental properties is the industry, the immediate area. This is also public record. You guys can do your own researches, but I was following the Amazons and the FedExes and the Walmarts and the Apples, right? I wanted to know where those, some of those, or Nike or whatever, those big box organizations were going to be, updating or planting new warehouses, et cetera. Because what does that mean for me? That just is a bigger pool of renters that I'm going to have to choose from. And when I would do that, I wouldn't be right within the mainstream. So my philosophy was, for at least a while, I wanted to rent to families, right? The nuclear family is what I was looking at, and I would find, or I would look to see, okay, where is my FedEx? Where is my Amazon? Where is whatever? And I wouldn't go right within, a 5-mile radius. I would go a little bit outside of that, right? Because my price points were going to be more reasonable, et cetera, et cetera. Next up, and this one's going to be very, very important, and I'm going to share, I think I'll probably share screen and or a link with you guys. You guys, and you can get this information from your property manager. In fact, if you ask questions like this and they don't have the answers immediately offhand or off top of mind, that's a problem, run for the hills. But you want to know what the tenant landlord laws are in any state, municipality, city that you're going to be in. Again, you can get this from your property manager, but I might argue that you really want to know it for yourselves. Maybe take an extra 20, 30 minutes and just do the work. Let me share this with you guys. I think you should save this, bookmark it, whatever you want. Where did it go?
For those that are just joining also, oops, sorry, my camera's off. For those that are just joining also, Caeli's just reviewing the how to be prepared for your next, how to get ready for your next long-term rental. And she's going through different important checklists. If you have any questions, feel free to use the chat. You can also use the Zoom emoji just to kind of raise your hand, and it'll give us a note to pause, take yourself off mute, and ask your question. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Hold on, guys. I'm having some technical difficulties here.
Trying to share your screen, right?
I'm trying to share my freaking screen.
I have it. Yeah, we are not Zoom professionals. We work on Teams all day, so we come to Zoom, and it's just like, how do you do this?
Let's see if I got it right.
There we go. Now you got it.
Is it? What do you see?
Joanna's story call.
Okay, hold on. That's not what I want. Hold on. That's not it.
As long as it's an age appropriate picture, we're
yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, let's we don't really.
What about
the desktop?
Can you guys see state landlord tenant laws? No, you probably can't.
Yeah, you probably have to.
Hold on.
The other part here is for those that are joining the replay. Obviously, you'll be on the community. If you have any questions as a follow-up to this, please make sure you post them in the community. And as always, you can email over to Ridge Lending Group with any questions. You can email to info@ridgelendinggroup.com, or you can always call in too if you want to talk to somebody over the phone, and that's 855-74-RIDGE. Looks like we're seeing state landlord tenant laws, Shelley.
Yay. Okay, so guys, I'm going to put this in the chat as well. I do know how to copy paste, by the way. It's one of my specialties. So feel free to get this, keep it, bookmark it, whatever. This should be a good guide for any state that you're going to be looking in. Let's just pick whatever. We'll pick Arizona. So if you pick your state, you can go through here and pretty much anything that you're going to want to need to know related to your rights versus the tenant rights and what the processes are for eviction and deposits. All of this stuff are going to be handy right here for you on a state-by-state basis. So I think this will be a good resource for you. Very, very important that even if you're not an expert in it, you should have at least an understanding, a baseline understanding of what that's going to look like in the event you find yourself in a situation where you have to evict somebody. Okay. Any questions? You guys everybody get that? I put it in the chat if you need it. Please feel free to refer. Anybody have anything? Anything?
There are
Pause?
no questions.
Okay.
We'll just say thanks.
Okay. And as we're talking about property management, this has been a topic of conversation a few times for us in our weekly community meetings. I feel like I can just go through a few of the bullet points just as a refresher. Property management, as far as I'm concerned, is probably the most, if not tied for first, maybe second, depending on a variety of other variables, most important thing about selecting a solid turnkey long-term rental, short-term rental, whatever, investment property. Property management is huge. Now, for those of you that are hyper ambitious, Godspeed, and you want to do property management yourself, you've got some wood to cut. There is a lot that you need to go out there and educate yourself about. If you're going to do this and you think you can just wing it, I promise you, you will fail miserably. You want to have some of your ducks in a row before you go down that path of property management. There's a lot more to it than you can possibly imagine, and it could really be expensive. It could be a very costly mistake by not being prepared. For those of you that want to leave that to others, the property management checklist, the things that you really want to be asking are those tenant landlord laws in the area that you're in. They should be able to rattle those off very, very quickly. What you're looking for is you as the landlord, what are your rights? What does the eviction process look like? What does the property manager's process look like in relation to that? What is their vacancy rate? I think I mentioned that earlier. Anything over 5%, I would question. If it is more than 5% on average, ask. Maybe there's a reasonable explanation, but you want that number. The lower that number, the better. That just means that they have their systems in place and that they're keeping tenants in there all the time. And that turnover is probably on the lower end. The next question that you really want to have an answer to is what are the average lengths of leases within their management of properties? Generally, the longer the better, as long as, and this is the follow-up question to that, as long as they have a routine maintenance of annual appreciation of rents. And if it's not annual, it better be at minimum every 2 years. And by how much? Are they appreciating rents by 2% or 3% or 5%? There should be a number and there should be a reason behind that number. And that's also stuff that you guys can find online in any given market. I think, I may be wrong on this, but I think the FHFA.gov, Federal Finance Housing Association, it gives you the appreciation for property. That might be another one. Let me just pull this up and I'll put this into the chat too. FHFA.gov. They have tools and things within their website that will allow you to kind of see past, present, and futuristic appreciation rates for different markets around the US. I believe there's going to be something in here too for that rental income appreciation. So going back to our property management.gov, you want to know how often and by how much do we believe they're going to appreciate those rents annually or every two years. Now, some property managements are extremely conservative where this is concerned. And I kind of feel like they do this because they don't have the skill set to retain tenants. If they're real hesitant to say that they appreciate rents, it's because they don't think that the properties, they're either not taking good enough care of them, or they're not attracting the right tenant pool to allow for that. And in their mind, a lot of the times the pushback from a property manager why they say that they're not going to appreciate rents is because if they do that, they're just going to lose the tenant. And then the cost to get it re-rent ready, et cetera, ends up being more than the other. I don't know that I agree with that. Maybe there are exceptions to that rule too in certain markets, et cetera. But more often than not, I'm going to be of the opinion that you should be appreciating those rents. The property should be in all good working condition. Property manager should be doing their job. Copy.
We did have a question, Caeli. So this is more of a question for the group here. We've got about 27 odd folks that are on here. For those that do actually have rental properties, kind of pushing Caeli to her point of appreciating. Has anyone not found success in appreciating, or increasing their rents year over year, especially with the current conditions of rental? Is anybody struggling with that? It's always a good question. It's good to talk about. Gloria, thank you. Gloria is like no idea, and Caeli just posted also in the chat the download section for the FHFA.gov. So definitely make sure if you do have questions, part of the idea of the community is to engage with each other and publish this stuff out. So if you have questions or you've tried a strategy and it hasn't quite worked, especially if it's market specific, please bring it up and give everybody a chance. So right, it depends on the neighborhood, right, Al? Right, Caeli?
Yes, absolutely. Wait, hold on, Al. What depends on what I just said yes. I just being agreeable.
Ability to increase rents.
Okay. Yes, maybe. I think that I would, anybody that is with a property management company that really resists the appreciation of rent, regardless of neighborhood, I would want to have a higher level conversation, maybe one-on-one, and just peel it back and really understand why. Maybe it's legitimate, maybe it's not, but those are questions that I would want to be asking. 9.9 times out of 10, you need to be appreciating those rents annually or every 2 years at minimum.
There were a couple of feedback points. One was for government subsidies through Section 8. There might be specific guidelines that prohibit rent. That makes me think also if you have any rent controlled unit, if you're in that kind of a thing. There's
your exceptions, yeah.
And then of course, Al makes a good point where some areas are harder to rent. So, you do want to test. I think maybe what you're saying, Caeli, instead of saying you absolutely have to do it, I think the thing is you absolutely have to make sure that you increase where you can.
Maybe that's a better way to say that. Yes. I can tell you for my properties, the circumstances for the properties I elected and those exceptions to the rules are the Section 8, right? There's going to be some restrictions there. The other one I'm spacing right now. The other one you just mentioned, it's in New York, is a big
rent control.
Thank you, rent control. You're going to have very specific guidelines and regulation you have to follow. That didn't apply to my personal experiences. I was always increasing rents, and maybe it was more modest and from one market to the next. The ones that weren't doing it, though, I learned the hard way that it was to my distinct disadvantage. Anyway, okay. I sent you guys the link for the FHFA. I drilled down in there and I got you to the data tools. You should be able to check out, if anybody is there, here, let me just share my screen again. Let's see if I can figure this out a second time.
While you're doing that, Caeli, we did have a question coming back. Sure. That actually is a really good point. LQ, thanks for posting that up. We'll talk about that in a moment.
Okay. This is the link that I just sent. This is where you guys want to be for housing. I don't know that I'm going to try and drill down for the rents, but I think it's in here. But you want to be on the housing price index, HPI. and you'll be able to go through here and on a it's not going to have every county, every city, but it'll have the bigger ones, multiple per zip codes, etc. And then you can go through and if you've got a property that's on the outskirts, just use the metropolitan area closest to you, and you can kind of get an idea. Again, it'll tell you where appreciation's been for the last however many years. It'll tell you where we are today, and then it'll even give you forecast appreciation numbers for the future. And who has more data than the federal government? So this is a good resource. I would definitely say that you guys want to bookmark this one too. Okay, where did I leave? Or we want to answer that question?
Yeah, so we had a couple of things. Francis made a good point that during the peak of COVID, there were government restrictions on rent increases. So
thank you, Francis. That's true.
That's a very good point. And of course, that gets back into being aware of what you're allowed to do as a landlord. And LQ points out that, they're in a situation where an outside investment firm bought up a ton of properties in a particular neighborhood, and it put a lot of pressure on what they were able to do as small-time property owners in terms of rental increases. But I think one of the things that you didn't talk about entirely directly, Caeli, is what is the long-term plan, right? So it's not like we can increase every year at 10%.
Sure.
So what
it's got to be market
on that?
Yeah, guys, it's got to be market appropriate. The other thing, let's go back to who said the question about there was a hedge fund that purchased up a lot of properties.
LQ.
Let's talk about that. Let's dig that apart a little bit. So I have been in situations like that, and I had to get creative, right? They've got much deeper pockets than I have, and I can understand how they can move the needle with a lot more meaning than I ever could. But then my philosophy is going to be what's my value add? What do I have? What can I get? I'm small, I can maneuver, right? They're like turning a battleship in a creek, those guys. So what can I do with my properties that are going to make them just this much more desirable, or the curb appeal, or maybe we throw in 3 months of garbage, whatever it may be. Think it through, try to come up with a renter's mentality if you can. I used to be a renter, right? So maybe go back a few hundred years to when you were the one renting a property, and come up with some real value add that would allow you to attract a different profile and give you the opportunity to compete against something like that and appreciate the rents. Yeah, and to be clear, you guys, I'm not saying that, yeah, appreciating rents 10% annually. I mean, 10% annually, I don't know that I've ever been in a market or situation where, well, San Francisco, maybe New York, I'm sure that there's markets, but it has to be specific to the market the property's in, clearly. Anyway, that was a good point.
If we want to go down and go back and revisit the checklist items, covered neighborhood, talked about property class, tenant pools, schools and industry. And when you were mentioning industry in the promo for the group, it was more about, are you following certain industries? Like, could you dive back into that?
Yeah, I'm gonna jump on the coattails of who is going to be smarter with more access to micro and macroeconomics and all of those different things. And I'm probably going to go and say, all right, where is Nike building their next warehouse? Where for a variety of reasons, right?
We just had a huge announcement from Microsoft in Ohio. So that's another where they paid some ungodly amount for farmland because they're going to build their next monster factory there.
So what that means to me is, one, we're going to have a greater pool of tenant, but the urban growth boundary, so to Larry's point, you said farmland, right? So with that, my guess is, I've not verified this, my guess is that the urban growth boundary in that area is about to extend. Nike's going to know a hell of a lot more about all of those details that would be helpful to me as a landlord in attracting tenants, and some of which may be working for Microsoft. So I'm going to do my research and find out where big industry is putting their money. Additionally, they're usually going to be in places where there are tax incentives of X, Y, and Z. Will they apply to you? I don't know, but I would want to find out. Anyway,
Any
Okay.
questions from the group? Again, I know we've got some comments here. Is anyone dealing with any particular struggles? LQ is Lynn, by the way, Charlie, just in case we
Hi,
ever see
Lynn.
LQ again. You know, today's topic was really about getting you ready for your next long-term rentals. Anyone have any situational questions they want to cover? Now would be the time. We've got a few minutes left here on the call today.
And feel free to unmute, you guys. You don't have to use the chat if you don't want to. If you want to be Ridge community famous, now is your 15 minutes worth of fame for the 30
10
people
seconds
here.
of fame. Fair enough.
Okay.
I think, Caeli, one question that I know I had prepped in case nobody else asked, but do you find in terms of getting ready for your next long-term rental, you know, all these important checklist items, one of the things you don't mention, we didn't call out on the piece, was what is your rate of return? Is that, you know, how important is that when trying to figure out your next long-term rental?
Well, first of all, I think that you need to be realistic about calculating whatever that number is and what your basis for that has been over the last 2 years. It's not that anymore. And if it is, it shouldn't be. You should be looking at the other angles. That needs to be a little bit lower. And now we need to start layering in appreciation in certain markets, the tax benefits, rent appreciation, all of that stuff. And so I said at the top of the hour, or the top of the half hour rather, part 2 of this deep dive is going to really be about calculating your ROI and your cash on cash. Those are 2 different overall calculations, but both are equally important. So in our next live event, that's going to be what we really dig into and discuss. Maybe expectation. What was it? What is it? What should it be? The differences, why they're both important, and what the actual calculations are. I think that Larry and I had talked, and we're going to try and come up with, I may actually have to hack this and find one that I like best, because there's so many of them, right? You just Google it and you can get 100 of them in an instant. But we were going to try and come up with our own spreadsheet that might account for some other details that would be useful for real estate investors.
We should build a web page, Caeli, and put it on
We should.
rentgroup.com and figure that out.
We should, yes. I wholeheartedly agree.
So Lisa asks a question, talking about industry. How do you feel about military bases for long-term?
Good. Ooh, who said that?
That was Lisa.
Lisa, great question. I love that. And that would be another, so if anybody didn't hear, so I used to go to the relocation division of any one. Nike was the one that I did. Okay, this was a long time ago. They're headquartered here in just outside Portland, Oregon. You can go to the individual bases and get with whoever handles the housing, and send them donuts or a coffee or something. Do something to differentiate yourself from the masses so that you can utilize that leverage, that relationship, or that connection, and get long-standing good tenants, the ones that are going to be there the longest, et cetera. I think that's a fantastic strategy for tenant profile military, understanding that there is just the very regular turnover more often than not, 6 months, 12 months. I don't even know anymore. My father was military, and a lot of my family is. But what is maybe Lisa, you might know this, the average per family, a year, 2 years? Anyway.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what the average turnover is. I feel like, and this is just going to require more research on my part, but I feel like depending on where the bases are, that there's some long-term stations, positions, like Colorado Springs area. And then there might be some others where they're more frequently deployed from. And that would be something to differentiate between like which bases are more deployment focused and then which are more people are on site stationed there where you wouldn't have the higher turnover. And that's an excellent second question that I did not consider, but will definitely look into.
And you just said something, and I was thinking about, so military, off base, maybe it'll come back to me, or I'll email you. But yeah, I like that as a strategy or one of several strategies for a tenant profile. It would be consistent and stable.
Lynn did put a note in the comments. Thank you, Lynn, for putting that up. So in this area where BlackRock bought a bunch. So again, here's following industry, right? So BlackRock Investments buys a bunch of houses in
Huge.
the military area. They must know something. So Lynn loves it. The one thing she points out is you cannot in the lease, especially for a veteran, charge for breaking a lease. So make sure you're up to speed on that. Javier posted a link. This calculator.net, Caeli, they beat us to it. They put a ROI calculator. I don't know if it's any good, and Javier loves it. So we'll check it out. So thank you, Javier, for posting that. And
oh, I've seen this one. This is actually a good one. Good call, Javier. Yeah, this is pretty complete. Although I feel like, is this the one that if you don't have, if I decided that, does it let you do it without maintenance in there? Or does it make you, yeah, it'll let me do it. There's a few cells that if you don't have a field filled out, it won't let you go past, and I want to choose. So, but this is a good one.
So we should copy this and put it on ridgelendinggroup.com, Caeli.
Yeah, let's do it. And then we'll get sued for, yeah.
It's the internet.
Infringement.
Terrific. Any other last, I don't see any other questions. Any other parting thoughts, Caeli?
I'm going to make a note that we left off on property manager, just different things to ask. I think there were a few more that I didn't get to that maybe I'll start with next time. And then let's be prepared, you guys, to dig into, we'll get into tax benefit next time. And then we'll start, there's also exit strategy. We might have to make this a 3-parter. So let me just recap. So round out property management as things that we want to make sure that we are quantifying and asking and really understanding for our long-term rentals. Maybe the tax strategy. I see that my very good friend Steve Wexler is here on the call, and he and I are having some conversations right now about certain loan products and the tax implication, giving up this to gain that. So we'll start to talk a little bit about that. Maybe he'll give me some intel if he finally gets a hold of his CPA for that call. And then exit strategy. Excuse me. Another big thing that we really want to focus some attention on with our long-term real estate investments. What are our exit strategies? What different strategies are there? And specifically, what do those mean for real people like us? So maybe we do that next. And if we have time, we can get into the actual calculations and the differences between ROI and cash on cash.
I think you just laid out our entire month of September to live events.
Finally, I'm ahead of the curve. The first time, I think.
Could be. So as a follow-up, I know this has come up a couple of times in chat. We do, as Ridge Lending Group, we want to make sure that we're giving you the proper resources to try to figure out that analysis. And as Caeli said earlier, we're going to put together an agenda with some great reference material to try to guide you down that path, to make sure you have as much information available to you as possible to make the best decision you can. If you have any questions about anything that you heard today, you want to follow up with personally, or you have a scenario, or you want to find out what's going on with loan products or rates or whatever, just call 855-74-RIDGE, or you can email to info@ridgelendinggroup.com and get hooked up with a dedicated lending specialist. From here, if you have any questions at all from what you've heard, again, you can post it also on the community.
Ooh, I had one. I do. I was talking real quickly, guys, just in closing. It just reminded me, posting in the community. So I was talking to a client this morning. She may be on the call. If Cara, you're here, this is for you. Anybody have any experience with Vacasa? Now, this is a little unrelated. This is short-term rentals. Vacasa is one that handles the short-term rentals from a holistic perspective. Anybody that's had any experience dealing with Vacasa, please, if you could post in the community. I think she will be looking for that next time she's around.
Like Picasa, the old Google thing, Picasa?
No, with a V. V-A, Vacasa.
Vacasa with V like Victor.
Yes.
All right, good deal. Well, I think we're all clear, Caeli. All the questions are out. Nobody's raising their hand. And we had an awesome group today. Thanks everybody for coming. If you just got here, I'm really sorry, but we're at the end. But good news is we'll get the recording up for the replay. Everybody else, have a great rest of your day, and thank you.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.